Call me Mary. I remember walking into that party, feeling like a complete mess. It was just a couple of weeks after Jason, my then boyfriend, decided he had had enough of us. "It's not you, it's me," he said, the same old tired line. So there I was, drowning my sorrows in a glass of cheap wine, surrounded by couples looking all happy and in love at our friends' get-together. I felt out of place, like a sore thumb sticking out in a sea of bliss. Enter Alex. I hadn't noticed him until he was right beside me, his sudden appearance pulling me out of my gloomy thoughts. "Looked like you could use some company," he said, his voice smooth, with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. I remember looking up, ready to give him a piece of my mind, but the words died on my lips. There was something disarmingly honest in his gaze that made me pause. "Company, or a distraction?" I retorted, my tone sharper than I intended. I was in no mood for small talk or flirting. "Whichever you need more," he shot back with a grin that was both infuriating and charming at the same time. It was the first time in weeks that I found myself genuinely smiling, despite my best efforts to stay miserable. We spent the rest of the evening talking about everything and nothing. Alex had a way of making the mundane interesting and the heavy stuff seem lighter. He didn't pry into why I was upset, nor did he offer any unsolicited advice. He just was there, making me laugh and forget about the heartache, if only for a few hours. As the party winded down, he offered to walk me home. "It's late, and the streets aren't exactly friendly at this hour," he said, a note of concern in his voice that felt comforting. I hesitated for a moment, my mind screaming at me that it was a bad idea to walk alone with a guy I had just met. But then, looking into his eyes, I felt an inexplicable trust. "All right, but if you try anything funny, I swear I'll scream," I warned him, half joking, but also dead serious. Alex threw his head back and laughed, a sound that was unexpectedly delightful. "Fair enough. I promise to be the perfect gentleman," he said, offering me his arm in an exaggeratedly gallant gesture. That walk home was the beginning of everything. We talked about our jobs, our families, our dreams, and our disappointments. Alex worked in IT, a geek at heart with a passion for old-school video games and a knack for fixing just about anything. I told him about my job in marketing, how I loved the creativity it allowed me, but hated the office politics. By the time we reached my apartment, I didn't want the night to end. There was something about Alex that felt right, like a puzzle piece I didn't know I was missing. "Thanks for tonight. I needed it more than I thought," I admitted, feeling a twinge of vulnerability. "Anytime," Alex said, his voice soft. "And hey, if you ever need a partner in crime or just someone to vent to, you know where to find me." And I did. In the days and weeks that followed, Alex and I grew closer. Our initial banter turned into deep conversations, and the more I got to know him, the more I liked him. He was caring and attentive, always there when I needed a shoulder to lean on or a laugh to brighten my day. It wasn't long before our friendship blossomed into something more. Looking back, I can hardly believe how quickly things progressed. But with Alex, everything felt easy, natural. It was as if we were meant to find each other that night, to heal each other's wounds and build something new together. The day he asked me to be his girlfriend, he did so with a clumsiness that was utterly endearing. "So, I've been thinking," which is always a dangerous thing, he started, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "But I really like you, more than I've liked anyone in a long time. And I was hoping, maybe, you'd feel the same way?" I remember laughing, not at him, but at the absurdity of the situation. After all the heartache and disappointment, I had found someone who made me feel alive again. "I do, Alex. I really do," I said, and the smile he gave me in return was everything. The honeymoon phase, they say, doesn't last forever. But when the shift came for Alex and me, it hit like a freight train. I'd come home from work, bone-tired from the day's grind, only to find Alex sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to the TV, surrounded by a day's worth of mess. At first, I brushed it off, chalking it up to bad days or just a man's typical disregard for clutter. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the pattern held. One evening, after a particularly long day, I walked in to find the living room looking like a disaster zone. "Seriously, Alex?" I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice as I kicked a path through scattered shoes and gym bags. "You've been home for what, 4 hours? And the place looks like this?" Alex barely glanced up from his game. "What's the big deal?" "It's just a bit of mess," he replied, his tone dismissive. "A bit? You call this a bit?" My patience was wearing thin. "I've been at work all day, and I come home to this. It wouldn't kill you to tidy up a bit, would it?" He shrugged, a gesture that made my blood boil. "I work too, you know. Why should I spend my free time cleaning?" "Because you live here," I shot back. "It's called being an adult, Alex. Taking responsibility." His response was to turn up the volume on the TV, effectively ending the conversation. I stood there, fuming, as the realization sank in. This wasn't just about the mess. It was about respect, partnership. And right then, it felt like I was lacking both. One night, in a desperate bid for some semblance of order, I decided to tackle the kitchen. The sink was piled high with dishes, leftovers turning into science experiments. As I scrubbed and scraped, I couldn't hold back the tears. This wasn't the life I envisioned. This wasn't the partnership I signed up for. Alex found me there, elbow-deep in suds and misery. "Hey, what's this?" he asked, his voice softer now, laced with concern. I shook my head, unable to find the words. "I'm just tired, Alex. Tired of feeling like I'm doing this all alone." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I get it. I'll try to do better, okay?" But trying didn't seem to translate into action. Days passed, and the pattern continued. Promises were made and broken, leaving me to wonder if this was our new normal. The man I married, the partner I thought I had, seemed more like a distant roommate, leaving me to question where we went wrong. It wasn't just the chores or the mess. It was the growing gap between us, the silent meals, the unspoken frustrations. I missed the man who walked me home that night, who made me laugh and feel loved. Now, I felt more like a caretaker than a wife, struggling to keep us afloat in a sea of indifference. "Alex, we need to talk," I said one evening, the words heavy with a mix of dread and hope. "This isn't working. We're not working. And I don't know how to fix this if you're not willing to meet me halfway." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Alex. "I know I've been a jerk," he admitted, his voice low. "I'll try harder, I promise." Promises. I wanted to believe them, to hold on to the hope that we could find our way back to each other. But as the days turned into weeks, and the mess remained, those promises felt more like echoes of a past we couldn't reclaim. The mess around the house grew worse, if you can believe it. It wasn't just clothes or dishes anymore. I found dirty socks in the fridge once. Yeah, you heard that right. In the fridge, next to the butter. I walked into the kitchen, ready to make some coffee, and there it was, the sock, chilling with the dairy. "Alex," I yelled, holding up the offending item like it was evidence in a trial. "Explain this." He wandered in, looking bewildered and not the least bit guilty. "Oh, must have dropped it," he said, as if that was a normal thing. "In the fridge? Really, Alex? What's next, shoes in the microwave?" My voice was dripping with sarcasm. I was beyond frustrated. He just shrugged, that infuriating nonchalance on full display. "Could you just chill? It's not a big deal." Not a big deal? I was fuming. "It's disgusting, Alex. Your stuff is everywhere. It's like living in a dumpster." He rolled his eyes, turning to leave. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Just pick it up if it bothers you so much." That was the last straw. "I'm not your maid, Alex. This is our home, not your personal landfill. I can't do this anymore. Something's gotta give." We glared at each other, the tension thick. It was clear we were at an impasse. I thought of reaching out to his mom, hoping maybe she could knock some sense into him. Desperate times called for desperate measures, after all. So, I called her. "Hey, Mrs. Thompson, it's me. I don't know what to do about Alex. The mess, the disrespect. I'm at my wit's end." There was a sigh on the other end. "Honey, Alex has always been a slob. I cleaned up after him his whole life. I thought he'd change for you." Her words were like a punch to the gut. "So, what, I'm just supposed to deal with it? Clean up after a grown man because he never learned to do it himself? It's just how he is. He needs someone to take care of him, like I did. Now it's your turn, I suppose." My heart sank. I didn't sign up to be his caretaker. I thought we were partners. She was sympathetic but firm. "You're going to have to talk to him, dear. Lay down the law or something." That's what I should have done years ago. Hanging up, I felt no better. If anything, I felt more alone. It was clear that Alex had grown up pampered and unaccountable. And now, according to his mom, it was my job to reform him. I confronted Alex again, armed with a new resolve. "We need to talk. This can't go on. I'm not your mom, and I'm not here to clean up after you. You're an adult, act like it." It was a conversation we'd had before, but this time I meant business. The ball was in his court now. I could only hope he'd finally play fair. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the distance between Alex and me grew wider than the Grand Canyon. Our home felt more like a battleground than a haven. The love and laughter that once filled our space were replaced by silence and tension so thick, you could cut it with a knife. One evening, as I sat at the dinner table alone, staring at the 2 plates of food I'd prepared, waiting for Alex to join me, the weight of our situation hit me hard. He stumbled in well past the time we usually ate, his face flushed, not from the cold outside but likely from a few drinks after work. "Where've you been?" I asked, my voice barely hiding my frustration. It wasn't just about him being late, it was about him being absent when he was right there. Alex shrugged off his coat and dropped it on the chair, not bothering to hang it up. "Out," he said simply, as if that one word was explanation enough. "Out where, Alex? With who?" I pressed on, needing something more than his non-answers. He sighed, a sound of annoyance rather than remorse. "Just out with the guys from work. You know how it is." I didn't, actually. Our once shared experiences and stories had turned into his life and my life, with a chasm between. We used to go out together, remember? We had friends, a social life together. Now, it's like you're living a whole separate life. He finally looked at me, his eyes not meeting mine. "I just needed some space, okay? You're always on my case about something. The cleaning, the dishes, being home on time. Can't a guy catch a break?" His words stung, not because they were entirely untrue, but because they underscored how far apart we drifted. "A break?" I echoed, my voice rising despite my attempt to keep calm. "I'm not your warden, Alex. I'm your wife. Or at least, I thought I was. Partners give each other breaks, they don't take breaks from each other." Alex didn't respond. He just moved past me, heading for the fridge to grab a beer, as if that could solve everything. I watched him, a man I no longer recognized, and wondered how we got here. How did the man who once walked me home in the rain, who made me laugh until my sides hurt, become a stranger in his own home? "We're not okay, Alex," I said, the realization hitting me hard. "We're not okay, and I don't know if we can fix this." He paused, beer in hand, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Alex, the one who cared, who fought for us. But then he shrugged, a gesture that had become all too familiar. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we're not okay." His agreement should have been a relief, an acknowledgement of our problems. But instead, it felt like a door closing, a silent confirmation that we were too far gone to find our way back to each other. I used to hate the idea of business trips, preferring the comfort of home over the sterile environment of hotel rooms. But as the rift between Alex and me widened, those trips became my sanctuary. Escaping the constant tension and the cold silence that had settled over our house was a relief. I'd brace myself every time I returned, expecting to walk into the aftermath of a tornado. Surprisingly, each time I came back, the house was spotless, which was the last thing I expected given Alex's usual disregard for cleanliness. The first couple of times, I was genuinely pleased, thinking maybe Alex had finally decided to pull his weight around the house. "Did you clean up all this?" I asked, unable to hide my shock and a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could turn a new leaf. Alex just shrugged, an all too familiar, nonchalant gesture that irked me. "Yeah, figured it's the least I could do," he said, but his tone was off, too casual, like he was brushing off more than my question. Something didn't sit right with me, but I pushed it aside, grateful for the clean space, but unsettled by the sudden change. It was after another trip, coming home to the same uncharacteristically clean house, that curiosity got the better of me. I decided to thank the person I thought responsible, his mother. "Mrs. Thompson, thanks for cleaning up the house." "I didn't expect it, but it was a lovely surprise," I said, hoping to convey my genuine appreciation. Her confusion was a slap in the face. "Clean your house? Dear, I haven't been over in months. Alex should be taking care of his own mess, not you or me," she said, her tone a mix of surprise and a bit of annoyance. My heart sank, and a cold realization crept in. Confronting Alex didn't take long after that. "Your mom didn't clean." "So, who did?" "Because it sure wasn't you," I demanded, my patience wearing thin, tired of the lies and the evasiveness. Alex squirmed under the pressure, his usual confident demeanor crumbling. "Look, it's not what you think," he started, but his voice was too hesitant, guilty. I pressed on, needing the truth more than I needed to breathe. "Who's been cleaning our house, Alex?" "Because it's obviously someone." The admission came too quietly, laced with shame. "It's someone I know, she's been helping out while you're away," Alex confessed, finally meeting my gaze, but all I saw was betrayal. "A someone you know? You mean a mistress? You're cheating on me, and her token of affection is cleaning our house?" The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so tragically pathetic. He tried to defend himself, the words fumbling out in a messy spill. "It's not like that. She's just a friend." "A friend who cleans and sleeps with my husband? That's a new one, Alex." My voice was bitter, laced with anger and a heartache that dug deep. "I found out about his infidelity not through whispers or clandestine messages, but through a clean house." The irony wasn't lost on me, and though my heart was shattered, I couldn't help but marvel at the bizarre twist my life had taken. After all this, I decided enough was enough. Divorce was the only option left for me. Alex, surprisingly, didn't put up a fight. He let me go without so much as a plea for me to stay. Maybe that was for the best, or maybe it just showed how far apart we'd really grown. A few quiet months passed. I settled into a small, clean apartment that felt more like home than the house I shared with Alex ever did. Just when I started to enjoy my newfound peace, I got a call that turned my calm afternoon upside down. It was Alex's mom, and she was livid. "Come back to Alex this instant," she demanded, her voice sharp and filled with frustration. I pulled the phone away from my ear for a moment, confused. "Excuse me? Why on earth would I do that?" "Because he's a mess without you. His house looks like a pigsty, and I'm sick of cleaning up after him. His habits are driving me insane." I couldn't help but chuckle, though I felt a pang of sympathy for her. "And how is that my problem, Mrs. Thompson? I'm not his keeper anymore." Her voice softened, but the desperation lingered. "Please, he needs someone. His little cleaning lady ran off the moment she saw what a disaster he is." the irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. So, his mistress left because of the mess? That's poetic, in a way. She sighed, defeated. I just don't know what to do with him anymore. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. Mrs. Thompson, I understand it's hard, but I've moved on. Alex needs to learn to take care of himself, and you shouldn't have to clean up his messes either. It's not your job, and it's certainly not mine anymore. There was a pause on the line, and for a moment, I thought she might argue further. Instead, she simply said, I suppose you're right. I'm sorry for bothering you with this. It's okay. I hope things get better for you both, I replied, not unkindly. We ended the call, and I sat there for a moment, reflecting on the strange turn my life had taken. From a cluttered house and a failing marriage to a peaceful, tidy apartment all my own. I couldn't help but smile at the thought. Leaving Alex was the best decision I'd ever made, not just for my sanity, but for my soul. 6 months of silence passed since I walked away from Alex and that chapter of my life. Then, out of the blue, I remembered I had left something important at his place. With a sigh, I decided to retrieve it, thinking it'd be a quick in and out. Standing at the front door of the house we once shared, I knocked, waiting for any sign of life. Nothing. I used my old key to let myself in, not prepared for the scene that greeted me. The house was a disaster zone, garbage everywhere, the air thick with the stench of neglect. What the? I muttered, covering my nose with my sleeve. I called out for Alex, but the silence was my only answer. Concern growing, I checked the house and found him in the bedroom, looking like he hadn't moved in days, surrounded by filth. Alex! I yelled, shaking him gently. He was barely responsive, a shadow of the person he once was. Without hesitation, I dialed for an ambulance and the police, explaining the situation as best I could. When they arrived, I stepped back, watching as they took over, taking Alex to the hospital. As I waited outside, Alex's mom arrived, her face set in a familiar stoic mask. The police explained her son's condition to her, and her response was cold, detached. He's an adult. His choices, his consequences, she said, her voice devoid of any maternal warmth. I couldn't believe her indifference. He could have died in there, I said, anger and disbelief mixing in my voice. She just looked at me, as if I was a stranger speaking a foreign language. Not my responsibility, she stated flatly, turning away to talk to the officers. Standing there, watching the scene unfold, I felt a mix of emotions. Sadness for Alex, anger at his mother, relief that I had moved on. But above all, I felt a sense of closure, knowing that I had done the right thing by leaving when I did. This was no longer my life, my mess to clean up. I had my own path to follow, one that led away from this chaos and towards a future I was still writing. After everything that went down, I found out Alex was placed in a psychiatric hospital. Turns out, he had a progressive mental disorder that made him act the way he did with all that mess and his lack of cleanliness. Hearing that news hit me hard, way harder than I expected. Despite all the hurt and chaos, I couldn't help feeling sorry for him. So, I decided to visit him, even if his own mom couldn't be bothered. The hospital was stark and sterile, a far cry from the cluttered home we used to share. I met with his doctor, a kind man who seemed genuinely concerned for Alex. His condition's advancing faster than we hoped, he told me, his voice heavy with regret. At this stage, there's not much anyone can do except make sure he's comfortable and safe. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. And his mom? Does she come by? I asked, already knowing the answer. The doctor shook his head. Haven't seen her. It's tough, patients like your ex-husband, they need all the support they can get. I left the hospital with a heavy heart. Alex's mom hadn't changed a bit, still as cold and distant as ever. It was clear she had washed her hands of him, leaving him to face his demons alone. I couldn't help but wonder if things would have been different if she'd shown him a bit more love, a bit more care. As for me, life moved on. I found peace in my little apartment, a place I could call my own without any reminders of the past. I started anew, building a life that was entirely mine, free from the shadows of what used to be. My visits to Alex became less frequent, not because I didn't care, but because I realized it was time for me to let go and heal. I often thought about Alex, hoping he found some semblance of peace in his own mind. As for his mother, well, I hoped one day she'd realize the mistake she made in abandoning her son when he needed her the most. But that was a journey she had to make on her own.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie. making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.